Most people don't realize this. Overthinking doesn't stay harmless. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dangerous at first. It slowly steals your presence, your sleep, your ability to enjoy what's right in front of you. You're there but not really there. Your body is in the moment, but your mind is somewhere else, replaying, predicting, analyzing. And years pass like this. Moments blur together. Days feel busy but empty. And peace starts to feel like something other people have. That's the quiet cost of overthinking. Not a breakdown, not a crisis, just a constant mental noise that never turns off. This audiobook is an interruption, not later, not when you're more exhausted, not when your mind is completely burned out. Now, because the longer your thoughts run unchecked, the more your brain accepts chaos as normal. And once something feels normal, you stop questioning it. You stop noticing how tense you are, how rarely your mind rests, how often you're living inside your head instead of inside your life. Inner peace doesn't disappear suddenly. It fades while you're busy thinking. If you're tired of lying in bed with a racing mind, tired of missing moments because you're somewhere else mentally, tired of feeling like calm is always just out of reach, this is where the cycle breaks. Like the video, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and share this before someone else loses another peaceful night they never get back. Chapter 1. The storm and the sky. Overthinking is not intelligence. It is not wisdom. It is not preparation. It is a storm you learn to mistake for control. And if you've been living inside that storm long enough, the noise starts to feel like your identity. But it is. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who hears them. Picture a man standing on the shore watching the ocean. The waves crash, retreat, crash again. He believes the ocean is attacking him. He yells at it, argues with it, tries to outthink it. He plans every possible wave, every angle, every outcome. He is exhausted before he even steps into the water. Then an old fisherman walks by and says calmly, "You're fighting the ocean with your mouth." The man looks confused. The fisherman continues, "The ocean doesn't need your permission to move, but you can learn when to step in, when to step out, and how to float." That's the first shift. Your mind creates waves. It will do it whether you approve or not. The problem isn't that thoughts appear. The problem is that you grab every thought like it's a rope tied to your survival. You pull it tight. You wrap it around your chest. You call it analysis. You call it caution. You call it being responsible. But most of the time it's fear dressed as strategy. Overthinking often begins as a good trait that went unchecked. You learned early that thinking ahead kept you safe. You learned that guessing moods prevented conflict. You learned that predicting outcomes reduced embarrassment. Maybe you were rewarded for being mature and careful. Maybe you had to be. And over time, the mind built a habit. If I can just think enough, I can avoid pain. But life does not bend to mental effort. Reality is not a math problem you can solve by running the equation repeatedly. You can analyze the door for an hour, but the only way through it is to open it. There's a reason overthinking feels urgent. Your brain is trying to protect you from uncertainty by generating certainty. It scans for danger, rejection, failure, loss. It replays conversations, imagines future disasters, rewrites past mistakes. It treats maybe like a threat. But the mind has no off switch. If you keep asking it for perfect answers, it will keep producing endless questions. I once met a woman who couldn't sleep unless she reviewed her entire day like a courtroom case. She would relive the tone of her words, the expression on someone's face, a pause that lasted too long. She believed she was learning. In reality, she was sentencing herself. Every night she would search for evidence that she was failing. And because the mind is a brilliant lawyer, it always found something. One day she told me, "I just want peace." And I told her the truth. Peace doesn't come from winning arguments with your mind. Peace comes from refusing to live in court. Inner peace is not a state you stumble into. It is a practice you enforce. It is a decision you return to again and again, especially when your mind screams that you're falling behind. Peace is not passive. Peace is disciplined. Here is the second shift. Thoughts are not commands. Thoughts are suggestions. Some are useful. Many are noise. And noise becomes power only when you treat it as a signal. Imagine you're in a busy train station. Announcements echo. People shout. Footsteps rush. If you try to listen to every sound, you become overwhelmed. But if you focus on your destination, the station becomes background. That is how you stop overthinking. You choose what matters and you let the rest pass without negotiation. To do that, you need a new relationship with the mind. Not a romantic relationship where you cater to its moods, a professional relationship. The mind can bring information. You decide what to do with it. The mind can raise concerns. You decide whether they deserve action. The mind can predict disaster. You decide whether that prediction is worth your energy. This is where most people fail. They think the solution is to eliminate thoughts. That's impossible. The solution is to stop obeying them. Start with something simple, something real, something you can do today. When a thought appears and grips you, label it, not with drama, with precision, planning, remembering, worrying, judging, rehearsing. That label creates space. Space is power. Space is where choice lives. Without space, you are a puppet pulled by mental strings. Then do the next step, return to the body. Overthinking lives in the head, peace lives in the body. The body is always in the present. The mind is often in the past or future. So you anchor yourself where peace can actually exist. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel air entering your nose. Feel your shoulders and let them drop. Not as a relaxation trick, but as a signal to your nervous system. We are here now and we are safe enough to breathe. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. There's another reason you overthink. You don't trust yourself to handle what happens next. Overthinking is a counterfeit form of trust. You try to trust a plan instead of trusting your ability to adapt. But life rewards the adaptive, not the obsessive. Think about a basketball player at the free throw line. If he tries to calculate every variable in real time, his body stiffens. His shot collapses. But when he practices, when he commits, he shoots with calm. Not because he's guaranteed to score, but because he trusts the process. The mind wants guarantees. Inner peace comes from grounded confidence. I can handle what comes. You build that confidence through action. Not massive action. Clean action. The smallest next step taken with full presence. Overthinkers often wait for clarity before movement, but clarity is usually the reward for movement, not the prerequisite. The mind says, think more. The disciplined life says, do the next right thing. So here is a rule you will live by. If a thought requires action, act. If it does not require action, release it. If you forgot to pay a bill, pay it. If you need to apologize, do it. If you need to prepare, prepare. But if the thought is just a loop, a replay, a prediction with no concrete next step, it gets no more of your attention. It gets no meeting on your calendar. It gets no late-night debate. You let it pass like a car on the street. You notice it, you don't chase it. This rule will change your life because it exposes what overthinking really is: attention without direction, energy without outcome. You also need to understand the hidden addiction. Overthinking can feel productive. It gives you the illusion that you are working on your life. But thinking about lifting weights doesn't build muscle. Thinking about having boundaries doesn't protect your time. Thinking about confidence doesn't create it. The mind loves rehearsals because rehearsals feel safe. Reality is uncertain, but you cannot rehearse your way into peace. You can only live your way into it. A man once told me he had 20 different scenarios for how a conversation with his boss could go. 20. He had planned responses, counter-responses, emotional strategies. He was exhausted. When the conversation happened, the boss said one sentence he didn't predict and the whole plan collapsed. He realized something in that moment. The mind cannot outsmart reality. It can only meet reality. So he stopped writing scripts and started building strength. He focused on what he could control: his preparation, his boundaries, his tone, his willingness to be uncomfortable. The next time his mind tried to run 20 scenarios, he said, "Thank you, but I'm not doing that anymore." And he went for a walk. That is the voice you must cultivate, the voice of leadership inside you, the voice that speaks to the mind like a coach speaks to an athlete. Direct, calm, non-negotiable. Now listen closely. Inner peace is not the absence of problems. It is the absence of internal war. You can have a demanding job, a complicated family, a big dream, and still live with peace if you stop attacking yourself with constant mental friction. Peace is when your energy stops leaking into imaginary battles. Tonight, or the next time your mind starts spinning, do this. Sit down and ask one hard question. What am I trying to avoid feeling right now? Overthinking is often a distraction from emotion. If you're spinning, there is usually something beneath it: fear, sadness, shame, anger, loneliness. The mind would rather build a maze of thoughts than let you feel the simple truth in your chest. But feelings are not lethal. Avoidance is. So you practice staying, you breathe, you feel. You name the emotion without feeding it a story. I feel anxious. Not everything is going to fall apart. I feel disappointed. Not I'm a failure. Emotions move when you allow them. They harden when you resist them. As you end this chapter, consider where your overthinking takes you most often. Is it the past, replaying what you should have said? Is it the future, predicting what could go wrong? Is it other people's minds trying to read what they think of you? And when you notice that pattern, ask yourself what it has cost you in sleep, in presence, in joy, in courage. What would your life look like if you stopped holding every thought like a weapon and started holding your attention like a torch, aimed only where it can actually light the way? What is one thought loop you're willing to stop feeding starting today, and what is the next right action you can take instead? Chapter 2. Training your attention like a muscle. Last chapter, you saw the truth most people avoid. Overthinking is not control, it's a storm you've been feeding. You learn to label the mental noise, return to the body, and live by a rule that cuts through chaos. If a thought requires action, act. If it doesn't, release it. Now we take the next step, because insight without training turns into another loop in the head. Attention is the steering wheel of your life. Whatever you repeatedly steer toward becomes your reality, regardless of what you claim you want. Overthinkers don't suffer from a lack of intelligence. They suffer from undisciplined attention. Their mind is strong, fast, and sharp, but it runs without a driver. So it drifts to danger, regret, comparison, and endless rehearsal, and then it calls that drifting being careful. Here's the shift you must accept. You will not think your way into peace. You will train your way into it. The same way you build strength at the gym, you build mental calm through repeated, specific reps. Not once, not when you feel like it, every day. Picture a young pilot in a flight simulator. At first, the controls feel sensitive. He overcorrects. He panics when the plane tilts. He stares at every gauge at once, and that scattered attention makes him unstable. Then an instructor teaches him a simple skill: focus on the horizon, not the clouds, not the turbulence, the horizon. When he learns to hold his gaze steady, his hands steady, the plane steadies. The pilot doesn't control the wind, but he can control his response to it. Your horizon is the present moment, not as a poetic idea, as a practical anchor. Overthinking is turbulence. The present is the horizon. And attention is what keeps you from spiraling. Most people try to fix overthinking by wrestling thoughts. That's like trying to calm a shaken snow globe by shaking it harder. The only way the snow settles is if you stop disturbing it. You stop feeding the swirl. You stop treating every thought like an emergency, and you practice a different default. Your new default is single-task presence. You eat and you eat. You walk and you walk. You speak and you speak. You don't live in 3 timelines at once. This is not about being slow. This is about being precise. I knew a man who couldn't enjoy dinner with his family. He was physically present, but his mind was at work, at tomorrow, at last week, at a conversation he hadn't finished in his head. His children learned to stop trying to get his attention because they felt they were competing with invisible opponents. One evening, his youngest asked quietly, "Dad, where do you go when you're here?" That question hit him harder than any criticism ever could. He realized his overthinking wasn't just hurting him. It was stealing his life in real time. He decided to train, not with motivation, with structure. He created a simple ritual. Before he walked through the front door, he sat in the car for 60 seconds, 1 minute. He placed both feet on the floorboard, put his hand on his chest, and took 10 slow breaths. Each exhale was a deliberate signal. Work is over, home begins. If thoughts about work showed up, he labeled them tomorrow and returned to the breath. The first week felt pointless. The second week felt slightly easier. By the fourth week, his family noticed his eyes were different. He wasn't trying to be present. He had practiced presence enough that it started to happen on its own. That is how you change. Not by hoping for calm, by engineering it. Now let's make this practical in a way that holds under stress. You need 3 core habits: a daily reset, a thought boundary, and a decision process. First, the daily reset. If you don't discharge mental static daily, it accumulates. And when it accumulates, it explodes at night or during quiet moments or in the middle of a conversation you actually care about. Your reset is simple. Once a day for 5 minutes, sit with a timer. No phone, no music, no performance. Sit and breathe. Feel your feet, feel the air. When the mind wanders, label it and return. That's it. You're not trying to become a monk. You're training the most valuable skill you own, the ability to choose where your attention goes. At first, you'll think you're doing it wrong because thoughts keep showing up. Good. That means you're seeing the mind clearly. The goal isn't 0 thoughts. The goal is less obedience. Every time you notice the drift and return, that is a rep. It's the mental equivalent of a push-up. Do enough reps and you stop being dragged around by every impulse. Second, the thought boundary. Overthinkers have no boundaries with their mind. They accept every intrusive thought like an uninvited guest and then offer it a chair, a meal, and their entire evening. You need a boundary called the worry window. Choose a daily 10-minute block, ideally not at night. During that window, you are allowed to worry on purpose. You write down what your mind is spinning about, not to dramatize it, to contain it. If a worry shows up outside that window, you tell yourself calmly, "Not now," during the worry window. Then you return to what you're doing. This sounds too simple until you do it consistently. The mind learns through repetition. When you stop rewarding worry with attention at random hours, the mind stops banging on the door so loudly. You're teaching it that anxiety does not run the schedule anymore. Third, the decision process. Overthinking thrives on vague decisions. When you don't decide, you spin. When you decide, you move. And when you move, you build trust in your ability to handle outcomes. Here's a disciplined approach. For any decision that isn't life or death, set a time limit. 10 minutes for small decisions, 24 hours for medium ones, a week for major ones if needed. Gather the relevant facts, not endless opinions. Then choose. After you choose, you stop researching. You stop reopening the case. You act. The mind will protest. It will demand more certainty. It will whisper, "What if you're wrong?" You answer with the truth, "I can adjust." That is real confidence. Not being right every time, but being resilient every time. Let me give you a real-world example. A woman I worked with wanted to change careers. She had been thinking about it for 3 years. 3 years of podcasts, articles, comparing, doubting, waiting for the perfect sign. She wasn't stuck because she lacked options. She was stuck because her mind had convinced her that a perfect decision would remove discomfort. But growth always includes discomfort. So we created a time limit. 7 days to choose a direction, then 30 days to take visible action. She chose one path, updated her resume, reached out to people in that field, and applied to 5 roles. The first response was a rejection. Her mind tried to drag her back into overthinking. She felt the familiar urge to re-evaluate everything, to interpret the rejection as proof she shouldn't try. Instead, she practiced the rule from last chapter. Does this thought require action? Yes. The action was to improve her application and apply again. So she did. Within 2 months, she had interviews. Within 4, she had an offer. Not because the path was perfect, but because she stopped worshiping certainty and started honoring movement. Inner peace isn't found by removing every risk. It's found by building a mind that can sit with risk without collapsing into panic. Now we go deeper because overthinking is also a hunger for reassurance. You want to know how people see you. You want to know if you made the right impression. You want to know if you're safe in their minds. That's why you replay conversations. That's why you write speeches in your head. You're trying to control someone else's perception. You can't. What you can control is your integrity. The disciplined person stops chasing approval and starts building alignment. You do what you said you would do. You speak clearly. You apologize when you're wrong. You set boundaries when you're not. That steadiness becomes your peace. A simple practice will help you here. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question, not 10. Did I act in alignment today? If the answer is yes, you let the mind quiet down. If the answer is no, you choose one correction for tomorrow. 1. Not a punishment list. A plan. Overthinkers love complicated systems because complicated systems keep them busy. Peace comes from clean simplicity. There is also one more skill you must train, letting thoughts pass without gripping them. Imagine your mind is a radio. It plays stations all day. Some stations are helpful, some are nonsense. Some are pure fear. The mistake is believing every station is your identity. It's not. It's just a broadcast. When the fear station comes on, you don't have to destroy the radio. You just don't have to turn the volume up. You notice the station. You return to the horizon. You take the next right action. Over time, the fear station loses its influence because it no longer gets a captive audience. And when the mind insists that you must solve everything right now, you bring it back to reality with a single phrase. What is required of me in this moment? Not what is feared, not what is imagined. What is required? The answer is usually small. A breath, a message, a meal. A shower, a walk, a page written, a boundary stated. The present moment is not complicated. The mind makes it complicated. You're not here to be a perfect thinker. You're here to be a deliberate human being. That means you will think, but you will not be owned by thinking. You will plan, but you will not live in rehearsal. You will feel, but you will not drown in stories. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As you move forward from this chapter, listen to what your life is asking from you. Not in a mystical way, in a disciplined way. Where have you been giving attention to loops that produce nothing? Where have you been delaying decisions because you're chasing certainty that doesn't exist? What daily reset will you commit to, even on busy days, so your mind doesn't carry yesterday's noise into today? And when you feel the pull to reopen a decision you already made, what will it look like to stand your ground? Take the next right step, and prove to yourself that you can handle whatever comes. Chapter 3. Make peace with uncertainty in the first steps. You stopped treating every thought like a command and started treating attention like something you train. You learned to anchor in the body, contain worry instead of letting it roam, and make decisions with limits so your mind can't keep reopening the case. Now we're going to confront what overthinking is really trying to protect you from, because until you handle that root, the mind will keep inventing reasons to stay loud. Under every spiral is a feeling you don't want to feel and an uncertainty you don't want to face. Overthinking is a strategy to avoid both. It's the mind saying, if we stay busy, we won't have to be vulnerable. If we keep scanning, we won't have to sit with not knowing. If we keep rehearsing, we won't have to risk looking foolish. If we keep reviewing the past, we won't have to admit we're grieving it. If we keep predicting the future, we won't have to stand in the present and accept that it isn't guaranteed. But here's the discipline. Inner peace requires you to tolerate uncertainty without running. Not tolerate it with clenched teeth while secretly hoping it disappears. Tolerate it with a grounded spine and a steady breath. You don't need to love uncertainty. You need to stop treating it like an emergency. Imagine you're holding a glass of water at arm's length. At first, it seems easy. Then your shoulder starts burning. The longer you hold it out there, the heavier it feels. The water didn't get heavier. Your resistance did. Overthinking is like that. You're holding uncertainty away from you, trying to keep it from touching your chest. And the longer you do it, the more exhausted you become. Peace begins the moment you bring the glass closer, bend your elbow, and stop making a simple weight into a punishment. Most people have been taught a lie. That calm arrives when life becomes predictable. That's backwards. Calm arrives when you become predictable in how you respond. Life will always contain unknowns. Relationships will always contain risk. Your goals will always contain variables. So the question is not how to remove uncertainty. The question is how to build a nervous system that doesn't panic in its presence. Let's talk about the nervous system because overthinking is not only mental, it's physical. When your body is stressed, your mind searches for problems. When your body feels safe, your mind stops hunting as aggressively. That's why the same issue can feel catastrophic at 2 a.m. and manageable at 2 p.m. Your thinking changes when your state changes. There's a story of a young soldier who returned home and couldn't relax. Nothing was happening, but his body acted as if danger was around every corner. Loud noises made him jump. Silence made him uneasy. His mind constantly looked for what might go wrong. People told him to think positive, and it made him feel worse because he wasn't choosing to be tense. His body had learned a pattern, stay alert to survive, so we didn't start with philosophy, we started with physiology. He built a simple routine, morning sunlight for 10 minutes, a brisk walk to burn off adrenaline, slow breathing before meals, a hard boundary on news and scrolling at night. At first he resisted because he wanted a mental solution, but within weeks his baseline softened. His mind still produced thoughts, but they stopped arriving with the same urgency. He wasn't fixed by a clever idea. He was stabilized by a steady practice. You need that same respect for your state. If you want peace, you must stop living in a way that constantly signals danger to your body. Start with sleep. You cannot out-discipline a nervous system that is depleted. When you're tired, your brain becomes a drama machine. It turns "maybe I made a mistake" into "my life is ruined." So protect sleep like it's part of your spiritual practice, because it is. Build a shutdown ritual. Dim the lights, put your phone away, lower stimulation. Give your body the message the day is complete, then train your breath, not as a trendy technique but as a lever you always carry. When you exhale slowly, you tell your body to stand down. The mind might still chatter, but the volume drops when the body stops bracing. Choose a simple pattern. Inhale through the nose, long and steady. Exhale longer than the inhale. Do it for 2 minutes when you feel yourself spiraling. You are not trying to calm down. You are giving your system an instruction. We are not under attack. Now we address the emotional core. Overthinkers often treat emotions like messengers that must be interrogated. If anxiety shows up, they demand to know why. If sadness shows up, they look for something to fix. If anger shows up, they build a story to justify it. That turns emotion into fuel for more thinking. The disciplined approach is different. You let emotion be data, not destiny. You feel it in the body and allow it to move. Here's what that looks like: a tight chest, a knot in the stomach, a hot face, a heavy throat. Instead of racing to interpret it, you name it simply. Anxiety is here. Sadness is here. Anger is here. Not "I am anxious," as if you have become the feeling. The feeling is a visitor. You are the home. Then you do something that overthinkers struggle with. You stay. You don't fix. You don't run to distractions. You don't reopen 10 conversations to prove you're okay. You breathe and let the emotion crest and fall. Feelings are like waves. They rise, peak, and pass when you stop trying to hold them underwater. When you resist feelings, you extend them. When you allow them, they complete their cycle. A man once told me he always spiraled after social events. He would go home and replay everything. The jokes he made. The moment he spoke too much. The moment he spoke too little. He would try to calculate his social worth. He called it processing. But when we slowed down, we found the truth. He wasn't processing. He was avoiding shame. The event wasn't the problem. The The feeling afterward was, so we changed the routine. After any social gathering, he did a 5-minute decompression. He sat in his car or on a chair at home and located the feeling in his body. He didn't argue with it. He didn't feed it with stories. He just breathed and let it be there. Then he wrote a single sentence. I showed up. That was it. Over time, the spirals weakened because the shame no longer had to chase him through his thoughts to be acknowledged. It got seen and it softened. This is how you end the mind's obsession with control. You stop treating discomfort like a threat. Now let's make uncertainty your teacher instead of your enemy. The mind wants guarantees. Life doesn't give them. So you train yourself through intentional exposure to small uncertainties. Do something each day that is slightly unpredictable on purpose. Take a different route. Start a conversation without rehearsing it. Post the work before it feels perfect. Make a small decision quickly and accept the outcome, not recklessly but deliberately. You're proving to your mind that you can live without constant pre-approval from your fears. There's a powerful truth here. Confidence is not a mood. Confidence is evidence, and evidence is created by action. Overthinkers often wait to feel ready. The disciplined person becomes ready by doing the thing while slightly unready. You don't need full certainty to take a step. You need direction and willingness. And when your mind insists, but what if it goes wrong? You answer, then I adjust. Not as a slogan, as a commitment. You build a track record of adjusting. That track record becomes your peace. One more practice will change everything. Separate possibility from probability. The mind is great at imagining possibilities. It is terrible at estimating probabilities when you're anxious. It treats rare outcomes like they're about to happen. So when a fear shows up, you ask yourself calmly, is this possible or likely? Many of your fears are possible. Very few are likely. And even if they are likely, the next move is still the same. Act where action is available, release what is. The reason this works is because it returns you to reality. The mind lives in what if. Peace lives in what is. Reality is not always comfortable, but it is workable. Now there's a final layer to inner peace that overthinkers resist. Surrender. Not surrender as giving up. Surrender as ending the internal argument with life. You stop saying, this shouldn't be happening, and you start saying, this is happening. What is required of me now? That one shift removes a massive amount of friction. When you stop arguing with reality, you reclaim energy. You reclaim focus. You reclaim your day. You are not weak for accepting uncertainty. You are strong for refusing to be ruled by it. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As you apply what you've learned here, you will notice something. The mind still speaks, but you no longer jump at every word. Your body becomes steadier. Your emotions become less frightening. Uncertainty becomes a doorway instead of a cliff. And the more you practice staying present with discomfort, the less your mind needs to manufacture control. So listen closely as you step into the next days. When the familiar spiral starts, will you treat it as an emergency or as a signal to return to your breath and your body? What feeling have you been trying to outrun with mental noise? And what would it look like to sit with it for 2 minutes without stories? Where in your life have you been demanding guarantees? And what small, disciplined action could you take anyway to build evidence that you can handle whatever comes? Chapter 4. Close the open LOOPS. You've already stopped obeying every thought. and you've started training attention instead of negotiating with noise. You've learned to contain worry, make decisions with limits, and calm the nervous system so the mind stops hunting for danger. Now it's time to deal with what keeps the mind returning to the same place again and again. Unfinished business, unclear boundaries, and a life that's too crowded for peace to land. Overthinking feeds on open loops, unsent messages, unmade decisions, unspoken truths, half-committed goals, promises you made casually that quietly turned into pressure. When your life has too many loose ends, your mind becomes a frantic assistant, running through every item, afraid you'll forget something important. It keeps tapping you on the shoulder because, in a way, it's right. Something is unresolved. The path to inner peace is not just calming down, it's cleaning up. Imagine walking into a workshop where every tool is scattered across the floor. You can still build something, but you'll be stepping over clutter the entire time. Every movement will take effort. That's what it feels like to live with constant mental residue. Your mind isn't only noisy because it's anxious. It's noisy because it's carrying too much. You need a system that tells your mind you don't have to hold everything. When the mind trusts that life is organized, it stops gripping so tightly. And if your mind doesn't trust that, it will keep overthinking as a form of reminder and control. Start by making peace with a hard truth. You cannot have inner peace while your life is built on vague commitments. Vague commitments are poison. I'll get to it. I should probably. One day I'll. Those phrases create mental debt. And mental debt collects interest at night, so you become specific. If it matters, you schedule it. If it doesn't, you release it. That's the standard. Not because you're harsh, but because you're done being dragged around by unfinished thoughts. I worked with a man who was constantly tense, even on weekends. He'd be sitting with friends, but his jaw stayed tight, his eyes kept checking his phone, his mind was elsewhere. He said he felt like he was always behind, always forgetting something. We sat down and did a simple exercise. We wrote down every open loop he could think of, things he owed, tasks he delayed, conversations he avoided, decisions he postponed. The list was longer than he expected, and when he saw it, he finally understood why his mind wouldn't rest. It had been trying to carry a warehouse on its back. Then we did the next part, and this is where peace begins. For each item, he had to choose one of three moves: do it, schedule it, or drop it. No fourth option. No keep it in my head. Within a week, his mind was noticeably quieter, not because his life became perfect, but because his mind finally believed him when he said, "I've got this handled." That's what overthinkers need most, proof of reliability from themselves. So here is your practice. Once a day, you do a mental sweep. You ask, what am I carrying that I haven't contained? Then you write it down, not in a dramatic journal entry, in a simple list on paper. Getting it out of your head is not optional. Your mind is not a storage unit. It's a tool for focus. Then you choose. One item gets done immediately if it takes under 5 minutes. One item gets scheduled if it requires time. One item gets dropped if it isn't aligned with your values anymore. That last one matters, because overthinking is often the result of trying to keep promises that are no longer true. This leads to the next pillar of peace: boundaries. Overthinkers often have weak boundaries because they fear conflict and want to be liked. So they overcommit, they over-explain, they over-apologize, and then they overthink the consequences. The loop is brutal. You can't find inner peace if you keep saying yes to things that don't deserve your time. A boundary is not a wall. It's a door with a lock. You choose what enters. If you struggle with boundaries, you don't need a personality makeover. You need a sentence you can repeat without debate. Simple, calm, final. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available. The more you decorate the sentence, the more your mind starts bargaining and the more the other person senses an opening. Overthinkers love to explain because they want the explanation to prevent judgment. But judgment is not yours to control. Your responsibility is to be clear. There's a story of a woman who kept agreeing to help at work even when she was already overloaded. She would say yes, then spend days resenting it, losing sleep, imagining how to manage everything and worrying she would disappoint everyone. She thought her problem was time management. It was. It was self-betrayal, so she practiced a new response. I can take that on next week, or I can help you find someone else. That sentence did two things. It respected her capacity and it gave an option without surrendering her boundary. At first, her mind panicked. It predicted backlash. It predicted rejection. It predicted that she would be seen as selfish, but nothing catastrophic happened. In fact, something unexpected happened. People started trusting her more because her yes became meaningful. And her mind quieted because it stopped living in the fear of hidden obligations. Peace requires honesty, especially with your calendar. Now, let's address the inputs that keep your mind inflamed. Overthinking is often fueled by what you consume. Non-stop news, endless opinions, constant comparison, and entertainment that never lets your nervous system settle. If you keep pouring noise into your life, you'll keep getting noise out. You need a thought diet. And like any diet, it's not about perfection. It's about standards. There was a time when people weren't exposed to thousands of opinions a day. Now you can wake up and immediately absorb fear, outrage, envy, and confusion before you've even taken a sip of water. And then you wonder why your mind feels scattered. You didn't wake up broken. You woke up and opened the gate. So you set a rule: no consumption before creation. Before you take in the world, you establish yourself. A few minutes of breathing, a glass of water, a short walk, a page of writing, a prayer if that's your path, something that says, I'm not starting my day in reaction mode. Then you limit comparison, because comparison is gasoline for overthinking. It makes you question your timeline, your choices, your worth. It pulls you into imaginary competitions that you never agreed to. The antidote is not pretending other people don't exist. The antidote is returning to your values. What matters to you, not what is being performed loudly. Values are the backbone of inner peace. When your actions match your values, the mind has less to argue about. When your actions violate your values, the mind becomes a courtroom again. That's why alignment is calming. It's not just moral, it's neurological. Your system relaxes when you stop living in contradiction. Here's a practical way to use values without turning it into another mental project. Choose 3 words that describe how you want to live, not goals, ways of being. Maybe it's disciplined, kind, courageous. Maybe it's focused, honest, steady. Write them down. Then, when you feel the pull to spiral, ask a single stabilizing question. What would a person who lives by these words do next? That question pulls you out of rumination and into behavior, and behavior creates peace. Because the mind quiets when it has a clear next step. Now we talk about closure. Overthinkers are rarely short on insight. They're short on closure. They start emotional chapters and never finish them. They leave conversations hanging. They carry old guilt. They keep returning to past versions of themselves and trying to rewrite what happened. But the past is not a puzzle to solve. It's a chapter to learn from and close. Closing doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop paying rent to something that's over. One of the most powerful things you can do is a short closure ritual. When something keeps looping in your head, write a letter you will never send. You put the truth on paper, what you felt, what you needed, what you wish you had said, what you're choosing now. Then you end it with a simple decision. I release this. Not because it was fair, but because you are done bleeding on it. This isn't about being soft. This is about being free. And then you take a real-world step that matches that release. You set a boundary. You have the conversation. You delete the number. You forgive yourself and act differently tomorrow. Closure without action becomes another story. Closure with action becomes peace. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As you move forward, remember what your mind has been asking for this entire time: clarity, containment, and trust. When you close open loops, your mind stops shouting reminders. When you set boundaries, your life stops overflowing into constant mental negotiation. When you protect your inputs, your nervous system stops bracing. And when you live by clear values, your inner world stops arguing with itself. So ask yourself quietly, with discipline and honesty, what are the 3 open loops that keep returning to your mind? And which one will you do, schedule, or drop today so your mind no longer has to carry it? Where are you saying yes out of fear? And what would a clean, simple no look like this week? What inputs are you consuming that inflame your thinking? And what would it feel like to close the gate for just one day and reclaim your attention? And if you chose 3 values to guide you, what is the next action that would prove you are living them, not just thinking about them? Chapter 5. Build your inner sanctuary. You've already learned to stop letting every thought pull the steering wheel, and you've trained attention so your mind isn't running wild without a driver. You've faced uncertainty without panicking, and you've started cleaning up the clutter of open loops and weak boundaries that keep your inner world buzzing. Now we go to the deeper layer, the place inside you that stays steady even when life is loud. Inner peace is not a mood you hope arrives when things finally calm down. Inner peace is a home you build within yourself, so no matter what the outside world does, you have a place to return. Overthinkers often live like they're always on the porch, scanning the street for threats, waiting for the next problem to appear. They don't realize they have a front door. They don't realize they can step inside. To build that inner sanctuary, you need to understand something uncomfortable. The mind will always generate noise, but you don't have to make that noise personal. The thoughts that show up are not a biography, they are weather. And the reason you've been suffering is because you've been acting like every cloud is a prophecy. Your sanctuary begins with a shift in identity. You stop introducing yourself to yourself as someone who overthinks. You stop using that label as a permanent condition. You might have a habit of overthinking, but you are not a person defined by it. Your identity becomes, I am someone who returns. I return to my breath. I return to the present. I return to the next right action. I return to the life in front of me. That's the first brick. The second brick is learning how to speak to yourself. Overthinkers often have an inner voice that sounds like a harsh manager. It interrupts everything. It criticizes without precision. It demands perfection and then calls you weak when you can't deliver it. That voice is not truth. It's conditioning. It's a pattern you can retrain. I once met a runner who could finish long distances, but he couldn't enjoy them. His body was strong, but his mind attacked him every mile. "You're too slow. You're falling behind. You're not built for this." When I asked him where that voice came from, he didn't know. He just assumed it was him. Then I asked him a simple question. If you coached someone you loved, would you speak to them that way? His face changed. He finally saw it. He had been trying to build a peaceful life while carrying an inner bully. So we trained a new voice, not a fake voice, a disciplined voice, a coach's voice, clear, firm, respectful. When the mind criticized, he responded with a sentence that held him steady. "We're here to finish, not to perform." Over time, his body ran the same miles, but his inner experience changed completely. He didn't become soft. He became aligned. Your sanctuary requires that same alignment. You don't need to lie to yourself. You need to stop abusing yourself. Here's a practice that will change the atmosphere inside you. When a thought shows up that is attacking you, you ask two questions. Is it true? Is it useful? If it's true but not useful, you acknowledge it and move toward action. If it's not true and not useful, you stop giving it the microphone. Your mind might still whisper, but you no longer build your day around a whisper. There is another reason inner peace feels far away for overthinkers. They keep trying to earn it. They treat peace like a reward for being flawless. Once I fix my life, then I'll relax. Once I reach the goal, then I'll breathe. That thinking creates a future that keeps moving. You hit one target and the mind builds another. You never arrive because you're chasing peace through achievement instead of practicing peace as a way of being. This doesn't mean you lower your standards. It means you stop postponing your life. Think of a craftsman sharpening a blade. He doesn't sharpen once and declare it sharp forever. He returns to the stone regularly, not because he's failing, but because maintenance is part of mastery. Inner peace is the same. You don't achieve it and keep it without effort. You maintain it through small rituals that bring you back to center. You need 3 rituals: a morning entry, a midday return, and an evening release. Your morning entry is how you step into your day without being swallowed by it. Before you speak to the world, you anchor yourself. Even 2 minutes is enough if you do it consistently. You sit, you breathe, you feel your body, and you set one intention, not 10. 1. Something like, today I will be steady. Today I will be clear. Today I will do the next right thing. This is not motivational fluff. This is a signal to your nervous system and your mind that you are leading. Your midday return is how you stop the day from building pressure. You pause between tasks. You take a short walk. You drink water slowly. You breathe before you answer the next message. You don't let your life become a sprint where your mind is dragged behind you. You remember that speed without presence creates anxiety. Your evening release is how you let the day end. Overthinkers carry the day into the night like a backpack full of rocks. They try to rest while still holding responsibility. So you create a closing ritual. You ask, what is done? What can wait? What is the next action for the one thing that matters? Then you stop. You let the day be complete even if it wasn't perfect. Completion is a decision, not a circumstance. Now your sanctuary also depends on what you do with silence. Silence scares overthinkers because it exposes what they've been avoiding. So they fill every gap with noise, podcasts, music, scrolling, constant input. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is a mirror. And if you want peace, you must be willing to meet yourself. Start small. 5 minutes of silence a day. No phone, no talking, no multitasking, just you. At first, your mind will protest. It will flood you with thoughts. It will try to bargain. It will try to escape. That's normal. You are training your ability to stay. The goal is not to have a blank mind. The goal is to prove you can be alone with your experience without panicking. A woman who built a successful career told me she was terrified of silence. She could handle meetings, deadlines, conflict, pressure. But in quiet moments, her thoughts would attack her. She believed the solution was to stay busy forever. And that worked until it didn't. Her health started to suffer. Her relationships became thin. She was achieving and disappearing at the same time. So she made a deal with herself, 10 minutes of silence each morning. No exceptions. The first week felt unbearable. The second week felt uncomfortable but manageable. Then something shifted. She started hearing what her busy life had been drowning out: exhaustion, resentment, and a deeper desire to live differently. Silence didn't break her. Silence gave her instructions. And because she was finally listening, she made better decisions. Her mind grew quieter not because she forced it to be quiet, but because she stopped abandoning herself. That is what your sanctuary is for: honest contact with your own life. Now let's talk about the strongest form of inner peace: self-trust. Overthinking is often what happens when you don't trust your ability to handle outcomes. You keep running simulations because you're afraid you'll collapse if something goes wrong. The cure is not more simulations. The cure is building proof that you respond well under pressure. You do that by making and keeping small promises, not huge, dramatic goals. Small promises that you honor daily. Wake up when you said you would. Take the walk you committed to. Speak the truth in one conversation you've been avoiding. Stop scrolling when you decided to stop. These actions look small, but they do something profound. They teach your mind that you are reliable. When you become reliable to yourself, the mind stops frantic monitoring. It starts to rest. And here is a final brick for your inner sanctuary: forgiveness. Not as sentiment, as strategy. Overthinkers often keep revisiting old mistakes because they believe revisiting is repentance. But replaying the past is not accountability. It's self-punishment disguised as responsibility. Accountability is simple. You learn, you correct. You move forward, that's it. If you made a mistake, you take ownership, you repair what you can, and you change your behavior. Then you stop bleeding in the same place. Forgiveness is not saying what happened was okay. Forgiveness is saying you are done being chained to it. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Leave a comment with your biggest takeaway and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now let's continue. Your inner sanctuary is built with daily returns, clean self-talk, silence, small promises kept, and the refusal to live in perpetual punishment. It is the place inside you that remains calm not because life is easy, but because you are steady. And as you build it, you'll notice something powerful. Problems still exist, but they don't invade every corner of your mind. You handle what is real, and you stop feeding what is imagined. So ask yourself as you move forward, what would change in your life if you spoke to yourself like a disciplined coach instead of a harsh critic? What small promise can you make today that would build evidence you can trust yourself tomorrow? Where have you been trying to earn peace through perfection? And what would it look like to practice peace as a daily ritual instead? And if you gave yourself 5 minutes of silence each day, what truth might finally rise to the surface, not to hurt you, but to guide you home? Chapter 6. Live like a still river. You've learned to stop obeying every thought and to train attention like a skill, not a hope. You faced uncertainty with steadier breath and steadier choices, closed open loops and set boundaries so your mind could stop carrying everything, and built an inner sanctuary through clean self-talk, silence, small promises, and forgiveness. Now this final chapter is about living it, because peace is not a concept you collect. Peace is a way you move. There is a difference between a quiet life and a quiet mind. You may not be able to control your circumstances in every season, but you can control the way you meet them. Inner peace is not hiding from the world. It is standing in the world without being pulled apart by it. Picture a river. After a storm, the river may be loud, fast, muddy. But the river does not panic because it is moving. It doesn't stop and accuse itself of being imperfect water. It doesn't argue with rocks. It doesn't sit awake at night rehearsing where it should flow tomorrow. Continues. It adapts. It moves around obstacles. It carves a new path when necessary. That is what you are building, a stillness that is not frozen, a calm that can move. Overthinking turns you into a stagnant pool. The water sits. It collects debris. It grows heavy, not because you're weak, but because you're stuck in a cycle of mental recycling. This audiobook has been teaching you one central principle through every story and every practice. Movement creates clarity, and clarity creates peace. But now you need something even stronger than clarity. You need a code. A simple set of non-negotiables that keeps you steady when life tries to pull you back into old patterns. Your code begins with the rule you already know. If a thought requires action, act. If it doesn't, release it. In this final chapter, you take that rule and apply it to your whole life. You become a person who acts on what matters and refuses to feed what doesn't. Then you add the second rule. You do not negotiate with spirals. You notice them, you label them, and you return. You don't sit down for a debate with your fear at midnight. You don't reopen a decision you already made because your anxiety wants another round. You don't hand your attention to the loudest thought in the room. You lead. That leadership will be tested, not once but repeatedly. A stressful day will try to drag you back. A difficult conversation will try to pull you into rehearsal and self-judgment. A disappointment will try to hook you into the past. A big goal will tempt you into obsession with outcomes. That's why peace is not a finish line. Peace is a stance. And a stance must be reinforced. So let's talk about reinforcement. You reinforce peace in 3 ways. You simplify, you commit, and you return. You simplify your life by removing unnecessary decisions and unnecessary noise. Not because you hate fun, but because you respect your mind. The mind becomes quieter when life becomes cleaner. You simplify by setting routines that reduce friction. Morning entry, midday return, evening release. These rituals are not accessories. They are the architecture of your inner sanctuary. You simplify by reducing the number of things you claim you care about. Overthinkers often carry too many important things at once, then wonder why they feel overwhelmed. When everything matters, nothing is handled well. Peace comes when you choose what matters most and let the rest be secondary without guilt. Then you commit. Commitment is what ends mental bargaining. When you haven't committed, you think about quitting. When you haven't committed, you keep researching. When you haven't committed, you keep asking other people what they think. When you haven't committed, your mind stays noisy because it senses the door is still open. Commitment is closing the door. This doesn't mean stubbornness. It means clarity. It means you decide and you live inside your decision long enough to see results. You allow time to work. You allow habits to compound. You allow your nervous system to learn stability. And then you return. Returning is the true skill, returning to the breath, returning to the body, returning to your values, returning to your code, returning to the present, returning to the next right action. The reason this matters is because you will not become a person who never overthinks. You will become a person who notices faster and returns sooner. That is the real victory. The gap between being pulled and returning gets smaller. And as that gap shrinks, your peace becomes durable. Let's ground this in a final story. A man was building a business and trying to rebuild his health at the same time. Every day felt like a test. He would start strong, then the pressure would rise and the overthinking would come back. What if this fails? What if I'm wasting time? What if people judge me? What if I can't keep up? The thoughts were relentless and he hated himself for it. He thought peace was something other people had because they were built differently. We changed one thing. We stopped treating overthinking as a character flaw and started treating it as a signal that his system needed structure, not shame. He wrote his code on a card and kept it in his pocket. In the morning, he read it. Before important meetings, he read it. When he felt the spiral rising, he read it. The code was simple. Return to the body. Do the next right thing. Close the loop. Protect sleep. Keep small promises. Speak cleanly. Release what you can't control. At first, he still spiraled, but he recovered faster. Then the spirals became less frequent. Then something happened that made him realize he had changed. A major deal fell apart. Old him would have stayed up all night replaying every detail, blaming himself, predicting disaster. New him felt the punch, sat with the discomfort, and asked a single question: what is required of me now? The answer was simple: call the client. Learn what happened. Adjust the plan. Go for a walk, eat, sleep, continue. That night he slept. Not because life was easy, because he had built a mind that didn't need internal war to feel responsible. He had learned the difference between care and panic. He had learned that discipline is not a cage. Discipline is freedom. That is your goal. Now, let's make sure you leave this audiobook with something you can carry into the hardest days. Here is how you live like a still river. When a thought arrives with urgency, you pause, you breathe, you ask, does this require action? If yes, you act. If no, you release. When uncertainty shows up, you stop asking for guarantees. You ask, what is required of me in this moment? Then you do it. When you feel your mind pulling toward old loops, you contain it. You write it down. You do it, schedule it, or drop it. You do not leave it floating. When you're tempted to abandon yourself with harsh self-talk, you correct the voice. You speak to yourself like a disciplined coach. Clear, firm, respectful. You build a home inside your own mind. When you're overwhelmed, you return to basics: sleep, breath, movement, silence. These are not small things. These are foundations. And when you fail, because you will sometimes fail, you do not turn one mistake into a life sentence. You learn, you correct, you forgive, and you move. You stop paying rent to the past. This is what inner peace looks like in real life. It looks like someone who is not easily baited by their own mind. It looks like someone who doesn't need constant reassurance because they have built self-trust through small promises kept. It looks like someone who can feel discomfort without needing to build a story around it. It looks like someone who acts with values instead of reacting to fear. Now, this is the moment to claim it, not as an idea, as a decision. You are done living in court. You are done feeding the storm. You are done holding uncertainty at arm's length until your shoulder burns. You are done carrying open loops like invisible chains. You are building a life where your attention is yours, where your mind is a tool, not a tyrant, where your peace is protected by structure, not luck. And the only way this becomes real is through action. Today, you will do one thing differently. 1, not 10. You will take the next right step. You will close one loop. You will practice 1 minute of breath and presence. You will set one boundary. You will keep one small promise. You will return, because returning repeated is transformation. If this audiobook is bringing you value so far, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs to hear this, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway, and subscribe to Prime Audiobooks for more content like this. Now, let's continue. As you step out of this final chapter and back into your life, choose your questions carefully, because questions shape attention, and attention shapes destiny. When the mind gets loud, what will you return to first? The breath, the body, or the next right action? What open loop will you close today so your mind doesn't have to carry it tonight? What boundary will you set this week that protects your peace without apology? What small promise will you keep so your self-trust becomes undeniable? And when uncertainty shows up, as it always will you demand guarantees that don't exist? Or will you stand steady, move forward anyway, and prove to yourself that inner peace is not something you find, but something you live?